According to reports, 22-time Grand Slam champion and retired legend Rafael Nadal spent $10,000 simply to watch Alex Eala play from the stands. Tennis world, amazed. However, why would the King of Clay pay that much for a lady he had previously taught for nothing? This is more than simply a ticket story. It's the tale of a genius, a mentor, the hope of a country, and the time when everyone in the tennis world paused to wonder, who exactly is Alex Eala? By the end of this film, you will understand why Rafael Nadal considers this 20-year-old Filipina to be one of the most exceptional players he has ever seen, and why the tennis world is just now beginning to catch up to what he already knew years ago. Stay tuned. There are athletes who discover tennis, and there are athletes who discover tennis. On May 23, 2005, Alex Eala was born in Quezon City, Philippines, a country where boxing is cultural, basketball is a religion, and professional, world-class tennis has virtually no history. During the Open era, no Filipino had ever made it to the Grand Slam singles main draw. In the WTA rankings, no one has ever placed in the top 50. This girl was going to accomplish something no one had ever done. When she first met the Nadal family, she was just 10 years old. It wasn't during a competition. It wasn't during a tryout for a prestigious institution. It took place in a clinic on the grounds of her Manila school. Rafael's renowned uncle and longtime instructor, Tony Nadal, was present. A little girl from Quezon City approached the group of young, wide-eyed children and struck a few balls with a man who helped mold one of the greatest athletes in human history. In an interview she would later joke about it and add, "Yeah, there's a video on YouTube of that, and I talked to Tony about that. He fed me a few balls while he was in Manila." He probably doesn't recall, but I can assure you that it did occur. She vowed that it occurred, and all that followed did as well. By the time she was 12, Alex Eala had packed up her belongings, bid farewell to her family, and relocated to Monaco, Spain, to attend the Rafa Nadal Academy. The school was built on clay courts, unwavering discipline, and the conviction that greatness is earned, day by merciless day, drill by drill, point by point. In pursuit of a dream her nation had never witnessed come true, she spent 6 years behind those walls, 6 years away from home, and 6 years training in a language other than her own. She became the first Filipino to win the Junior US Open singles title in 2022, after winning the Junior Australian Open doubles title in 2020 and the Junior French Open doubles title in 2021. Junior titles, however, are another matter. Professional tennis is a completely different world. Alex Eala's graduation from the academy in 2023 was accompanied by the same question that follows any prodigy who has ever left the security of a training institution. Is she really capable of doing it? The answer was on the way, and it would completely upend the sport. But consider this question before we reach Miami. How many athletes in history trained for 6 years under the Rafa Nadal system and, at the age of 19, were ranked 140th in the world? And how many of those players subsequently used their wild card to enter one of the biggest events on the schedule and completely upended it? Miami Open, March 2025. One of the WTA 1000's most esteemed events. Serena Williams, Steffi Graf, and every legend in the history of the sport have competed in this competition. Alex Eala, who is ranked 140th in the world, received a wild card, an invitation, and a gift from the tournament organizers, who may have recognized something in the young Filipina that the rankings were unable to quantify. Nobody anticipated the subsequent events. She easily defeated American Katie Vulinets 6-3, 7-6 in her opening match. A wild card victory occurs, and the tennis world hardly noticed. Then came Yelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion with a forehand capable of removing paint from walls and a game based on controlled chaos. Eala prevailed, 76-75. People began to take notice. Then came Madison Keys, the current Australian Open winner, ranked 5th in the world, and a player that is difficult for wild cards to defeat. Eala prevailed, 64-62. Not even close. Now, the entire tennis world was awake, completely, frantically. Then, in the quarterfinals, fate gave her Iga Swiatek with the black humor it reserves for the most dramatic occasions in sports. Over the past 3 years, Iga Swiatek, a 5-time Grand Slam champion and world number 2, has dominated women's tennis. What made it even more remarkable was that Swiatek had been asked by Rafa himself to attend Alex Eala's Nadal Academy graduation ceremony 2 years prior. On that day, the champion had honored the graduate, and they had shared an emotional moment. And now, 2 years later, they reunited on one of the biggest stages in women's tennis. Eala took home 62-75. The Philippines blew up. For a brief time, the tennis world became silent, that particular electrifying quiet that precedes an eruption. Rafael Nadal quickly took to social media while observing from retirement. "Alex, you have our utmost admiration. What a fantastic competition. Let's continue to dream." It didn't matter that she would ultimately lose to Jessica Pegula in the semi-finals. A 19-year-old wildcard from a nation without a history of professional tennis defeated 3 Grand Slam winners in a single week to become the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA Tour history. Rafael Nadal was also planning at the academy he established somewhere in Mallorca. This is the topic that no one was discussing following Miami. Nadal didn't simply tweet and move on. Unbeknownst to everyone, he was keeping a tight eye on things. The truly remarkable part of this narrative is what he chose to do next. For Alex Eala, the summer and autumn of 2025 were extremely busy. In June, she advanced to her maiden WTA final at Eastbourne. In September, she won her first WTA 125 championship in Guadalajara. She made it into the top 50. At the French Open, she made her Grand Slam main tournament debut. As the first Filipino to win a Grand Slam singles main draw match during the Open era, she made history by winning her debut match there. In a match that featured 3 dubious line calls, a mid-match request to replace the linesman, and an atmosphere so intense it felt more like a championship final than a regional competition, she won gold in the women's singles at the 2025 Southeast Asian Games in Thailand, ending the Philippines' 26-year drought in that event. Even after victory, Eala maintained her composure in the face of pressure that would have shattered inferior athletes. And there was a retired man who watched every game, every achievement, every historic first. Rafael Nadal returned to the court on November 19, 2025, precisely 1 year before he was set to retire from competitive tennis. He entered the courts of his own academy in Mallorca, took up a racket, and practiced with Alex Eala, not for a return or a display. He shared the video with his 14 million Instagram and X followers. "It was wonderful to be back on a tennis court a year later. Alex Eala, it was a pleasure to practice with you. I'll be stronger the next time." The internet exploded. However, nobody anticipated what happened next. Nadal had not only been following Eala's matches from home, but he had also discreetly made plans to attend one of her important matches in person. This was done in a situation where standard ticketing was unavailable and VIP arrangements had to be made at the last minute for the former world number 1. The cost was reportedly in the range of $10,000, according to numerous reports that swept through tennis circles and fan communities and sent social media into a complete frenzy. $10,000 for a single game. Eala had mentioned earlier in the year that Rafa had messaged me, describing the first private message Nadal had ever sent her. That was unexpected because it was the first time he had ever messaged me directly. It's funny because I didn't notice it until a few days later. Seeing his notice was thrilling. It took her a few days to notice it. Everything is made more relatable by that particular element. This 20-year-old from Manila, who is ranked in the top 50 worldwide, was so preoccupied with competing for a spot in the professional tennis league that she overlooked Rafael Nadal's private message for 2 days. This man, who could go anywhere, do anything and see anyone, is the greatest clay court player of all time. He would pay $10,000 to watch her compete in a stadium. That is belief, not mentoring. That is the kind of faith that generations of supporters recognize in one another. The tennis community also had a lot of opinions, not all of them positive. Not everyone was having a good time. The response to the tale, which spread via tennis media, fan accounts, and mainstream sports coverage, was split and revealed more about the tennis community's attitude toward newcomers than it did about Alex Eala. A few voices were joyful. Social media was inundated with unquantifiable pride from Filipino supporters. The notion that the greatest retired tennis player was paying out of pocket to watch their girl compete was the kind of validation that transcends rankings and titles in a nation where tennis has always been a pipe dream. However, criticism quickly followed in the tennis world. Eala's serve, which has long been regarded as the worst aspect of her game, was cited by analysts. She was defeated 6-0-6-2 by Coco Gauff in the Dubai Tennis Championships quarterfinals in February 2026. Tennis commentators were ruthless. She only won 32% of the points after her first serve and 40% after her second, according to one analysis. According to the evaluation, those stats won't help you compete with the top women's tennis players. She was then questioned about her level of fitness. Fatigued performances were being scrutinized at the age of 20 in ways that felt both appropriate and, to many supporters, premature. A more pointed question was posed by critics. Is Eala suffering more as a result of Nadal's public commitment to her? Does a young player who is still learning her craft feel more pressure because of the weight of his beliefs being exposed to tens of millions of followers? Some went much farther. Some voices in the tennis media claimed that Eala's position in the tennis hierarchy was being oversold by Philippine media and international sports entertainment outlets using the narrative of Nadal's $10,000 ticket. She had already defeated Swiatek. She was a WTA 125 champion. For a Filipino player, her ranking in the 40s and 50s was impressive. However, globally speaking, she was still a budding talent, and not quite the completed piece that the story appeared to be creating. Then there was the incident during the SEA Games. Eala had to deal with 3 straight dubious line calls from a linesman during the women's singles final in Thailand in December 2025. In a rare, audacious, and contentious move on that stage, she formally asked the umpire to change the linesman after the third. She won both the gold and the match. However, the incident was widely reported in Southeast Asian sports media. While some praised her poise, others questioned if it was acceptable. It further complicated the picture of a young athlete attempting to establish a career while navigating the politics of professional sports. The question that was being whispered in tennis circles was one that no one wanted to ask aloud, and the volume level was rising. What if the $10,000 ticket, the historic firsts, the national pride, the attention, and Nadal's endorsement all came together? What if it's too soon and too much? Here's what those naysayers failed to take into consideration though. This is what the serve statistics, golf losses, and social media chatter were unable to quantify. This is the real reason Rafael Nadal showed up. After practicing with Nadal in early 2026, Alex Eala was asked at a press conference in Abu Dhabi what it was like to share a court with a man who founded the academy that molded her. It was crazy, she claimed. Even though he hadn't played tennis in a year, it was physically taxing for me to play with him for the first time. Simply put, it's amazing that I practiced with Rafa. I consider myself extremely fortunate and fortunate. He gave me some excellent advice, saying that it's crucial to surround yourself with positive people. He also shared additional details about my game with me. I was extremely amazed by that. He shared details about her game with her. He wasn't merely there to celebrate. He arrived to instruct. The $10,000 was a mentor continuing an investment he had made in a young player before she was even old enough to have a professional license, not a fan buying a memento. Nadal didn't care about the money. The message it conveyed to Eala and the entire globe was what was important. Nadal is so grounded, he has accomplished more than I could have imagined, and it is very admirable that he is still so kind to everyone around here, according to Eala herself. The problem with real mentoring is that when the official arrangement expires, it continues. In 2023, Eala received her degree